One of the, Raquel and I have worked together now for several years working to change systems, to make workplaces more inclusive, more radically welcoming. And what we realized is that the systems are changing, but like not fast enough. We also need to be engaging in what the Black Panthers called survival pending revolution. So yes, the systems need to be better. And also we need to find strategies to survive and even thrive in these systems that were not designed for us. So we thought, what if we built a training where we put some of our learnings, some of our failures, some of the lessons that we've taken away from the best and the worst of our experiences in the nonprofit and corporate sectors, and held space for people to have this conversation about how do we build our resiliency, how do we advocate for ourselves, how do we show up in allyship for each other, and make it through the day while doing the work of creating more equitable systems. So we're really excited to be here with you all, and to share what we've learned, as well as to make space for you all to share what you've learned. How's that, Raquel?
Perfect, thank you. And apologies, everyone. I'm a little new to this platform. I'm a millennial, but I felt suddenly like not one. So thank you everyone for your patience and Trystan for your guidance. We're super excited to be here. Many of you have met Trystan before. Maybe some of you have met me before, but I'm Raquel, she, her, hers, and I'm really excited to be with you. We really want to focus on, the title says what doesn't bend breaks, right? So how is it that we can find ways to not bend as in let go of our spines or fortitude or anything like that, but how can we find flexibility within our own resiliency to get through things that sometimes feel impossible when we have to continue to excel and do better and better. Sometimes it feels like than our peers. So yeah, we're really excited to have this conversation with you. So we are beginning, or just wanted to present, or we just wanted to offer an acknowledgement of the land and the people who came first, the people who came first on these lands. And in other parts of the world, including Trystan's Canada, where Trystan's Canadian, this is a common practice in Canada and other parts of the world. It's less common in the United States. And so we just wanted to offer something that we also invite you to share in your future gatherings, be they virtual or in person, wherein you acknowledge the first peoples of this land and really name our place in honoring those people, standing in solidarity with them for Indigenous sovereignty. So this is just that offering. Trystan, do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say, where did this come from? Raquel, did you write this, or is there someone we can give credit to?
Thank you. Yes, I did.
Amazing. Okay, great. So this is like TM Raquel. Yeah, having gratitude for the people who stewarded the land on which you stand, and understanding their history and their culture, as well as what they're doing right now, is what we are offering. And in fact, I believe that Raquel specifically would like you to screenshot this.
Yes.
So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
You may have it.
Does everyone get that? All right. So we put this here. This is really one of my favorite quotes by Audre Lorde. And you'll see Audre Lorde's name throughout pieces of this session. And this for me is something, I have it framed in my home, it's in my kitchen specifically. This idea that like self-care is often looked at as something that's self-indulgent, that it's something that is about pampering and that it's excessive, right? But for those of us who hold marginalized identities, be they one or more than one, caring for ourselves is really an act of resistance, and it's active survival in a system that often hasn't sought to see us survive and has done things to ensure that we can't, or that it's more difficult. And so I live in a space where I try to engage in that self-care as an act of resistance against systems, be they societal, political, familial, organized religious spaces that have not encouraged me to honor my full self and to care for myself. And so as we go through this session and through this work, I hope that you can think of yourself as doing this self-care as an act of resistance and treat yourself as the sacred being that you are. So we just want to welcome you and ask that you take a moment to just sort of stop, acknowledge that this is maybe a different kind of workshop than others that you've been in today. Take a minute to just feel your body in your chair. We're all on our computers today, or our phones or iPads, whatever we're using. And just take a second to feel your body in your chair, in your shoes, or your fuzzy pink slippers, which is what I'm wearing, your pants or your yoga pants, which is what I'm wearing. Be aware of the temperature around you, any sounds around you. Do you feel hungry? Do you feel full? Do you feel warm? Do you feel cold? Any of those feelings, just really come into your body as much as possible. Let down your shoulders. If you need to stretch, if you need to breathe a little bit to be more present in this, this time is really for you. And it's about making sure that we all have a space to connect around some of the more difficult aspects of work, but also some of the really opportunity-rich aspects of being in workplaces.
I also put, or your bed, since I spent about 6 months of working from bed when I was pregnant in end of 2016, 2017. And my friends in the disability justice movement called it their soft office. And I was like, I love this. So yes, just naming, you might be in your bed or you might be standing up like I am, because speaking of accessibility in the workplace, I have ADHD and it's managed through medication. And also it's really helpful for me if I stand. That helps me focus. So we would love to hear from you all. Pop in the chat and tell us, what are the unique challenges and questions that you're coming into this with? What are some of the things that you're experiencing in terms of maybe microaggressions or any kind of bias that's coming up at work around your racial identity, around your gender expression, around ability, access, those kinds of things? What are the things that are showing up in your life that you're hoping we're gonna talk about today? Great, thank you so much. And if you don't feel comfortable sharing publicly, I know a lot of you might be here with like your coworkers or your boss, you can just use that toggle down in the chat and send it just to us. And we commit to not naming names if it comes just to us. Great, so some of the things we're seeing are misgendering at work. That appears to be frequent, constant. Family stuff around how do you stay in relationship with people with wildly different conservative or otherwise political beliefs. Having performance reviews not adequately address some of the concerns that you have, overwhelmed by how many damn conversations you have to have being a Black, Indigenous person of color, women taking maternity leave and being put behind in terms of career advancements, stigma around mental health, stonewalling, shunning by executives, apathy from colleagues. How do you get back up when my bend turns into a break? We're going to talk about that too. Sexist microaggressions. How can we help others understand and accept when trans folks come out? Chronic illness, feeling that my job doesn't do anything better to change the world. Yeah. Ooh, the assumption that female team members will automatically handle certain tasks for the team. Okay. Yeah, great. By erasure, mental health. We've never dealt with any of these, have we, Raquel?
No, it's all fine.
No, all fine. Everything's fine.
It's great.
Great. Oh, Aaron, and oh my gosh, like Allison, sorry, was diagnosed with ADD and got medicated this year as COVID made it worse. Oh my gosh, having to sit in front of a computer is extremely difficult. I'm actually gonna give very specific examples about how do you ask for accommodations in a way that doesn't feel like you're asking them to do something special for you or that they, whatever, I get stuck on my own thing, yes. Allyship, great. We're going to talk a lot about how to show up as a marginalized person for other people with marginalization. Yeah, this is amazing. Decision fatigue. Only queer person in your office. That sounds terrible. Have you ever been the only queer person in an office, Raquel?
Yeah.
Oh my God, that sounds horrible. I've been in the queer rights movement for most of my life, and so I can't imagine. Yeah. All right, we have a lot. This is amazing.
See masculinity and mental health as well.
Oh, someone was called the team mom. which I think also comes down to that gendered tasks and then like assumption of maternalism and taking care of everyone, which if that's not in your job description, you shouldn't be doing. Anyway, we'll talk about that. Yeah, someone says it makes me crazy that women are always asked to be the note taker. Taking the, you know, the language that might be difficult for some people around that, it's definitely frustrating. And that we're gonna see a lot of my slides have gifts from the television show The Office, because it's my favorite one. And one of my all-time favorite moments is they're in a training called Women in the Workplace, and a woman from corporate has come, and it's all women. And 2 minutes in, the woman from corporate turns to the woman who's the receptionist in the office and says, "Pam, are you okay to take notes?" And it was just like this brilliant example of how even when we're with other people with our identities, sexism can still sink in. Homophobia can still sink in. So anyway, I really love that. Thank you for sharing it. Okay, and then how do we balance what's happening out there in the world with what's happening here in our hearts? Yeah, thank you so much to everyone for sharing all of those things. And I hope we'll be able to touch on some of these, a lot of them. Internalized privilege, anxiety, yeah, thank you. So to tell you all just a little bit about me and us, I mentioned already, I'm a white transgender man. I'm a Canadian by birth, but I live in Portland, Oregon. I've been in the nonprofit movement my entire professional life. And so I spent 7 years at the National LGBTQ Task Force. And then I did a bunch of development and communications roles at different nonprofits around the country. I'm on the board of the Transgender Law Center. I spent 2.5 years at Family Equality, traveling the country, helping queer folks build families and then working with employers to treat them better. And then in July, I quit that job to run my own consulting firm and get to do this work as my job and get to work with Raquel even more frequently. And I share these experiences not to be like, look at me, I'm fancy, but instead to be like, I've worked at a lot of different organizations in a lot of different types of contexts. And there are still like very clear themes and trends that have happened at every single one of those organizations, in some ways more and in some ways less. Someone is asking where I got the shirt, and it is from Descendant of Thieves. Thank you. So that's a little bit about me.
Right. So this is also a little bit about me. I've spent about 15 years in nonprofit. I've worked, yes, in queer spaces. I've also worked in gender justice spaces, faith-based spaces, and also some international policy spaces as well, and human rights spaces. I met Trystan at Family Equality. We started roughly around the same time there, a few months difference, and he left shortly after I did. So again, just like Trystan said, the things that I share here are not to say, oh, look, I'm fancy, but you know, a lot of the things are things that I consider blessings to have experienced, and they also do speak to a range of experiences. I did co-found something called the Muslim Alliance for Sexual and Gender Diversity, which connects LGBTQ plus Muslims. We have an annual retreat for LGBTQ plus Muslims around the world. I happen to have been, not on purpose, one of the first publicly out queer Muslims, I thought maybe nationally, but as it turned out, internationally, which has been an interesting experience, sometimes great, sometimes not so great. I'm vegan for 24 years. I'm really focused on addressing issues of nutritional apartheid. I really try to make the work that I do and the ethic that I embody be as intersectional as possible. I chair my city's Commission on LGBT Affairs. I'm living in Philadelphia, and I really like coffee, and that's me drinking a coffee.
So, you know, we have some goals for the day. Primarily, we really want to bring our own things and then honor that you all are finding ways to survive too. And so really honoring that and inviting you all to bring your voices in the chat to share your experiences, your expertise, as well as to be kind and generous with one another. We are gonna, for us, this is a little bit, it's not a traditional workshop. It's not like first this, then this, then this, now you've learned it. It's a little bit more like, here are pockets of learnings that we've had that we want to facilitate conversations around. And so ideally, we want to help you strengthen your own ability to get back to yourself when things are hard. And we are, by the way, assuming that if you're here, it's because something is hard. You're coming in here because you're having to bear the double burden of doing your job, and then also having to be the free DEI consultant for all of your employees, whatever it is, or you're being misgendered at work. And so how do you get back to yourself when that is going on? How do you figure out when to go in, when to detach, etc.? We also hope that you will establish one new boundary for yourself. Raquel is like a genius about boundaries, so I'm also excited to learn from that section. And we're gonna give you some concrete skills, some tools for both standing up for yourself and intervening when you're being asked to do something that isn't appropriate for your role, or you're being asked to do something that is gendered in a certain way, as well as a tool for how to speak up for others if and when you are asked to do so by them. So that's those are our goals for the day. Oh, and I will just say a tiny note is that I have to do a keynote at the end of this, and so I will be leaving about 10 minutes early. So I'm so sorry, and I just got double booked for today.
That fancy again.
Nope, just poor planning.
Just kidding. All right, so we did set forward some, we wanted to have some community agreements for this space. I can't see you, we're not in the same room together. It is a little awkward, but we try to do it in person and virtually as well. So for virtual agreements, we'd like people to stay as present as possible. If you can reduce distractions, anything around you that might be distracting. If you can keep your camera on, if you're comfortable doing so, that would be great. We're not expecting you or even wanting you to be staring into it through the entire session if that's not comfortable for you. Someone raised their hand. Let me see. I don't know how to do this.
Sorry, this is a holdover from another training I did. So you cannot turn your camera on. So ignore that.
Oh, my bad.
They cannot turn their cameras on, just us.
Okay, so don't turn your camera on. Engage in discussion to the extent that you're able. I feel totally new to this, you guys, so we're all in it together. We do ask that you take care of your needs. And so we're going to have a break halfway through. If you want to draw, doodle, stretch, please do that. We're not expecting people to be just on for 90 minutes and not distracted. That's not reasonable. It's not fair. That's not what this space is about. If you don't understand something, please feel free to ask in the chat. You can pose it to the group, or you can use the little feature that Trystan talked about, the drop down, to ask us directly. So this is a mixture of head work, heart work, and hands work. So you might need to take it, like we said, you might need to take a break, but you might want to go full steam ahead. We do ask that you work to engage at the edge of your comfort zone. A lot of times these conversations are discussed as difficult, and we don't mean that this has to be difficult, but that sometimes it really can push what feels comfortable for us. At the end of the day, we are among colleagues here. We are in a professional space of sorts here. So this is maybe a little different for some of you, and it might be conversations that you're not even used to having yourself. Some of you might be experts in all of this and could teach me how to do this and teach Trystan how to do this. But we do ask you to try to expand where work to the edge of your comfort zone. And we do ask for folks to be real. You don't have to apologize for a question. You don't have to hold back on a question. I assure you, we've heard it all before. We've heard something more extreme, more outlandish than you could ever say to us in this context. I promise. The other piece is to please keep people's personal information in the room. There's something tricky about this, is that this workshop will be available within the app later. It is being recorded, but in terms of going, to your home space, in terms of going back to work or in networking spaces, just respect that people are coming here, and some people are coming here with some vulnerabilities, and we'll be sharing sometimes things that they wouldn't necessarily share, say at a networking event or at a cocktail party or whatever it might be. So try to do our best to really respect that people are being open and vulnerable in this space.
And when they record the video and release it, the chat will not be released along it. So they will just see us, Raquel and I, and the screen share. And so you can share things in the chat that will not show up. And again, actually, Raquel, could you go way back?
Oh, I hope
I need
so.
to do a reveal here.
I hate, this is going to be recorded.
Oh my God, just one tap. Okay, so I would love to hear from you all. We did some work thinking about, you know, Raquel and I have been supporting queer folks, trans folks, people of color in nonprofit and corporate settings in many different ways for many years. And so there are some very common things that are put onto people with multiple marginalizations in the workplace. And so I want to walk through some of the ones that we've found out in the world. We've experienced it ourselves, and then we've seen it in others mirrored back to us and reflected back. So let's talk about a few of those. So let's just go to the first one, Raquel, just one click.
Sorry, I was reading the chat briefly. Something in the chat. Sorry.
Okay, now one click.
I got you. I got you.
Yeah, no, go back. Oh my God.
Oh, you know, it's okay.
Okay, great. Never mind. All right, this is a lot. But so here are some of the sort of common things we see, and I'm going to ask you which of these is resonating with you right now. So the first one is tokenism, which is where you are often called on to represent your people, or you're like, oh, this is Trystan, he's our trans staff member. And really the full depth and breadth of who you are is distilled down to you are more of a symbol than an actual human being. So that's the first one that we've noticed that happens and has happened to me. I won't speak for Raquel. The second is just overt victimization. And so that's things like bullying, harassment, discrimination, retaliatory action, those kinds of things. The third one is overworking, which is where you find yourself being the first one in the morning, the last one to leave at night. I guess that doesn't work anymore, that most of us are on. But you're the first one at your computer, the last one leaving your computer. You are being asked to do DEI work, diversity, equity, inclusion work outside of your job description. So you're the one that's asked to go and teach the board about Trans 101. That's not my job. And that is a really complicated power dynamic that I don't appreciate being put in the middle of, for example. Okay, so that's the sort of overworking part. Or feeling like you have to prove yourself. Okay. Next one, microaggressions. I actually don't even like the word microaggression because there's nothing micro about it, but I'm going to use the word since we know what it means, which is those interpersonal acts of bias that you may not feel like this is big enough for me to actually tell HR that this happened. So it just builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. And that can be things like being misgendered. I think that being misgendered could also fall into the victimization category. So this I see a lot, specifically in the nonprofit sector. So I'm curious as to whether it shows up in the corporate sector as well, which is messy boundaries in the workplace, where it's not totally clear that we are people doing jobs, that we're not family, we're not friends. We can have love for each other, but we do not love each other. And then what happens is it becomes even harder for you to say, actually, this person that I work with all the time sexually harassed me or can't use my pronouns right? It becomes very difficult to draw clear professional boundaries when there's a little bit of that murkiness, that messiness in terms of what the relationships are on staff. And then the last one is feeling like you bring concerns, and what happens is it gets thrown back on you. So this has happened to me where I've said, you know, I'm really concerned about X, Y, and Z behavior that I'm seeing in the workplace. And what happens instead of them being like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that's happening, let's figure out why, they've been like, oh, that's not real. And we're concerned that you're seeing problems where there aren't any. That's the literal definition of gaslighting, is making you doubt your own reality and perception of the world. So I'd love to hear in the chat which one of these is really coming up for folks. So people do say that there are more clear boundaries in corporate than nonprofit, which is great. But I'm still seeing other folks saying yes, messy boundaries, tokenism, gaslighting. Overworking can happen a lot across gender. Yes, that totally makes sense. Yeah, with the overworking, feeling like, I think this happens a lot with parents as well. You feel guilty that you have to take the time off, and so you end up working all night, and then you're like, oh my God, I worked way more than anybody else. What am I doing here? Okay, overworking, especially with DEI work and work with the employee resource group, the ERG, yep. Microaggressions still happen, even when they have a policy against discrimination, absolutely. Gaslighting, yeah, that's great. I mean, it's not great, but thank you very much for sharing there. Microaggressions with pronouns and race, yeah. in case someone's in the corporate world and says all 6. Okay.
Yeah. I'm seeing a lot. Thank you everyone for sharing. I know it's not sometimes easy to really name that. We appreciate you.
Yeah.
We cover as much
Thank
as
you.
we can. So one of the things that we wanted to really cover is that, you know, very often when we're applying for, getting, and then finally starting a job, the focus really is on the expectations of you and how you will be a fit and how you will perform for the organization, firm, or company. However, like, and sometimes you can set some expectations around, for example, what compensation might look like, and that's a difficult enough conversation to have. But there are other expectations that you can also set for how you will be treated. And I think sometimes we don't think about that or realize that until it's kind of too late. And so that can be a really difficult dance as well. All of a sudden I'm developing these boundaries, right? All of a sudden I realize this trend is happening, and how do I turn that around? Ideally, we have the opportunity to define ourselves as we're going into a space, but we actually have permission to, we have to offer ourselves permission to shift what our own expectations are about how we'll be treated as we're learning more about ourselves in a particular workplace. I offered here a quote by Gloria Anzaldúa about just the fact that we, you know, when we join, you know, in this country, in our communities, in our workplaces, we are part of that community, but we also bring our full and unique selves to that. And it's perfectly okay to have your own unique needs and your own boundaries that help you to be the best person that you can be and the best employee that you can be. So I just want to take us, oh, someone said they just got asked to explain Hanukkah to their executive board. That's early this year. I so relate, as you can imagine. Yeah, you sometimes feel like you have to exceed in all things in order to pass. That's absolutely. And when you start a new job in particular, or you're taking on a new role, or you have a promotion, the instinct is to give absolutely everything that you can as soon as you start. The problem with that is, where do you go after 6 months when you've been working at that level and excelling at that level? At some point, something has to give. And so what does that look like? What does it look like to give yourself somewhat of a lower threshold, not necessarily of performance, but in terms of the amount of energy that you give to it, and make sure that you have somewhere to go as you expand your skills and your familiarity with the company. So Trystan said, I'm an expert at boundaries. That's not true. I'm just obsessed with boundaries. And this is somewhat, I would say in my personal life, it's not so new, but in my work life, it's a newer phenomenon. And I actually credit a lot of that to, I attended something called the 9 Retreat. And I was really blessed to be able to attend that, you know, as something that was sponsored both by a friend and a workplace at the time. And I attended several sessions with a therapist named Nedra Tawwab, who focuses on boundaries both in your personal and professional life. And it changed my life. And then I brought those boundaries into my workplace, and that didn't go over so well. And so a lot of the information that I'm sharing here comes out of that experience. But the reality is that we can't be successful in our work lives if we don't set our own boundaries. If we're constantly giving past the point that we actually can sustain, at some point, there's going to be a problem. Someone will be upset with us. Somebody will be disappointed. Someone will deem us a failure, right? We'll experience fatigue, burnout, resentment, and even workplace conflict if we don't define our own boundaries. If your CEO thinks that they can text you at all hours of the night, the first time that you don't respond might be a problem. We're going to experience some of these things anyway, some of this pushback anyway, but if we can help to define for ourselves what that looks like as soon as possible, there's going to be somewhat less of that. So right off the bat, if anyone can add, thank you, Trystan, for adding the website for Nedra. So can you just put in the chat anything that feels like maybe a boundary that you've struggled with in the past, something in this area that has been sort of stressful, or that you've hesitated to implement, or that you would like to implement? Volunteering you for projects. Yep. Allowing seniors to micromanage. You'll always say yes to anything anyone asks of you. I was absolutely that person. Needing a time to pick up your kids. Yeah. Switching off the phone at night, saying no to meetings when you have, yep. This is all super common. Too overwhelmed to speak up. Relenting when other people don't respect them. So having those boundaries pushed until they're broken. I completely understand it. Thank you. Thank you. Being the get or done person. Yeah, I think that that's super common, especially for people who have one or more marginalized identities. At the end of the day, we say, someone's got to get this done. I guess it's got to be me, right? People don't volunteer and it falls through the cracks. Thank you. Thank you all for sharing. This is super. Yep, that there won't be representation without your voice. Completely resonate with that.
And it's funny because the turning your phone off at night thing, the only reason that I can do that is because my partner, like 3 months into our relationship, I was still working at the task force, you know, and I was checking my phone throughout dates. I was checking my phone like late at night. And finally my partner was like, is there going to be an election at 11 p.m.? And I'm like, okay, well, no, but what if? And my partner was like, there's no what if. There's not going to be an election at 11 p.m. Turn off your phone. And someone said, well, how do you reset boundaries? And it is much harder to reset them later than to establish them in the beginning. And so we're going to talk a little bit about then how do you kind of manage up and how do you kind of tell them this is who I am now. But I would love to know from you all, just so we can get a sense so that people know that they're not alone. What are you doing right now? Just pop in the chat. What are you doing that's outside your job description and for which you are receiving no additional compensation? Emotional support across the team, ERG leadership, on ERG board for the 11th time. BRG work, what is that? Black Resource Group? No, you tell me, Lindsay. Fixing tech issues, running an ERG alone, additional admin work, constantly educate team about neurodivergence, helping employees transition, ERG, D&I trainings, training, design thinking workshops.
Sorry, I just saw a really big one. Carry on.
No, BRT. Okay, doesn't matter. I'll keep going. Attending the summit, leading, yep. So a lot of writing, ERG work, diversity training, volunteer work, mentoring, business resource group. Thank you so much. And an additional 8-hour per week project. Kill me. Why? A lot of people said coming to this training, meaning you are also expected to do your regular work while you're supposedly coming to this training. Yeah, so I hope that's helpful for everyone to see. Yes, look at all of the things that other people are doing. This is not just you, and the system thrives when we think, oh, it's just me that's being asked to do this thing. So I cannot possibly say, hey, I've really loved leading the ERG over the past 3 years. And as I look at 2021 and what my expectations for myself and for others are, I would like to get compensated for that position. And I'm happy to continue to do that leadership if and only if I will be compensated for that time. If not, here's a great white ally that can lead it for no money or whatever. Yes, so know that you are connected to literally hundreds of people who are always talking about the mental health pieces, who are trying to deal with polyamory and getting that covered, who are doing all this education, helping with tech issues, coordinating potlucks, administrative tasks. Yeah, so there's a lot of lack of clarity about whose job is what and what your job is and what happens when you get paid for something outside of your job. So Raquel is going to talk a little bit about what it means to set those boundaries.
Yeah, so someone said, do we mean compensation in terms of what we're actually paid, or did we mean figured into compensation? And it can be either. In terms of this work, is that part of the discussion in terms of what shows up in your paycheck, and what shows up in your time off, what shows up in your, whatever the benefits look like in your company in terms of how you are compensated. And I just gotta say, like 90% of the things that you all were naming are actual separate compensated jobs. Leading a diversity initiative, being the person to facilitate a program that helps employees to transition. I saw someone say that they are in company restructuring, they're having to reapply for their own job. That's heinous. You know, and I understand that the pandemic is difficult, but I just want to name that that's terrible, and I'm really sorry. But very often we are set up to end up having to do an entirely separate job on top of our own. And often that comes out of an organization or company's own failure to address a problem long before you started doing that work. So by the time you get to being the person who's chairing the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, by the time they've decided to form an ERG, by the time you've been named as someone who should lead the ERG, they've already really stepped in it sometimes, right? And so not only are you leading this work, you're not able to fully do so from a place of sort of promise and excitement and opportunity, but also you're cleaning up messes. And that really should be the job of a full-time person, perhaps a consulting firm, and it's not fair, right? Now, if that comes with a level of compensation that actually matches that work, maybe that's okay with you. Often it doesn't. And often you are, so there is also this guilt mentality or this burden. If you are the only person like you, if you are the only person who maybe has the fluency to talk about certain kinds of issues, there's this sort of responsibility put on your shoulders, either by yourself or others, that, you know, if you don't head up this DEI work, harm will be done to other marginalized people, and you are responsible for helping to prevent that or helping to heal that. And that's simply not, it's not right, but it's sort of the space that we're existing in right now. I just want to take a quick peek at the chat. Someone did say earlier, I want to say that I said it as another Muslim, hi, that they're asked to say, you know, what is Ramadan, right? Like nobody Googles, right? And this in and of itself just, you know, sometimes it feels fine and sometimes it feels awful. Someone said boundaries are tough because if I start saying no, not unless I'm compensated, the things that would get cut from my workload would be the D&I work, which is my actual passion, help. That's real. You know, I understand that. I've also experienced where the plate has just gotten too full and management will say, well, fine, then we're not doing the D&I work, right? And that's tough, right? Perhaps it's about changing what the goals are for D&I, finding the people who can help to support you in that. If there's a committee saying, what were the goals that we set out for this year? These are the resources and people that we actually have to do that work. And so we need to really restructure what it is we can actually accomplish and make a case for doing more, like doing things more effectively, but slowly, versus more things more quickly and less well, and to a point that leaves you exhausted or burnt out. So a couple of examples of what boundaries might look like at work include not answering questions about your identities if you don't wish to. I'm a visibly Muslim woman. I don't actually have to answer why I wear a headscarf. I can answer it if I want to, but I don't have to answer that. And I was answering that question without thinking up until about a year ago. You know, I was thinking about the response and I was feeling tense about it, depending on who was asking, but I don't actually have to answer that question. And you don't have to answer questions about why you dress the way you dress, who your partner is, or anything like that if you don't want to. Saying no to staying late or taking on uncompensated labor. You can set your Slack to do not disturb. This sounds all very basic, and I know that it doesn't come without consequences sometimes. I'm just sharing with you what that might look like. Finding a way to become known not as a person who drops everything to respond. And this is a huge one, I think, for a lot of us. How many of us are the people who, you know, if something's happening, Trystan's going to pick up the phone. Raquel's going to pick up the phone. She's going to answer that email in 10 minutes. She has all of these things to do, but you know what? I need a paragraph written and she's the only person I can think of to write it. Becoming known as a person who is not that person, who might be very willing to help, but is not going to drop everything that she needs to get done, in my case, to help you do your job. And then the biggest one is a huge part of something called white supremacy culture, is the fabricated urgencies. So in my own work in nonprofits, the work that we do is life-affirming, life-saving work in some ways, but it's also not an ER. It is also not brain surgery. It is not a spinal injury, okay? And so similarly to Trystan, this idea of checking your phone, responding to emails, refreshing things, even during an election, even if you're a real estate agent, even toward closing. My partner is a high school teacher and a real estate agent. So one of our big things is the closing paperwork and the offer paperwork and how this is all so urgent. Sometimes it's just not. And so deprogramming ourselves of these fabricated urgencies. So I'm going to check the chat and see what people are saying. Poor planning on your part does not make an emergency on my part. Right, exactly. I mean, I think
it's, I was going to include another GIF, which is one of my favorite scenes, another favorite scene from The Office, which is where one of the colleagues who is a straight white man is asked to do something. And he literally says, yeah, that's not the kind of task that I'm going to do. And I just I would never say that. And so I often think about how easy it is for people with privileged identities to just be like, yeah, no, not going to do that. And sometimes I do think how can I bring a little bit of that energy in to just say that's not something that I'm going to do. Or I can do that in these particular circumstances. Or I would love to sit down with you and figure out where this fits in with my other priorities so I can figure out what I can drop or postpone. Because a lot of people are saying how do you say no?
right.
And I'm terrible at it because I'm Canadian. And so often I'm passive aggressive and be like, oh my God, I would love to do that. Can you help me figure out how I could, given these other things on my plate?
Wow, I love it. So
how do you say no to answering those questions about your identities?
Right.
If you're I don't want to explain stupid Ramadan to you guys, Google.
So, that's a really tough one. You have this, I employ a filter to best ascertain people's intentions, but that's sticky. And also sometimes regardless of intention, I don't feel like talking about it. So I see a number of people have asked, how do you respond if you don't want to? What are the implications of your answer in terms of what they might assume about you in terms of that identity? One of the things that I've started to say is, I'm not comfortable talking about my religion at work. If that changes, I'll let you know. And the thing is, people might feel uncomfortable and weird about that, but it's actually normal and okay to feel uncomfortable and weird when you've you've transgressed a boundary, right? I don't walk up to people and ask them, why is your hair this color? Or why do you wear that style of shirt? And I understand that it's not perfectly analogous, right? But it's okay to say, I'm not comfortable talking about that at work. It's not comfortable for me. And if that changes, I'll let you know. Sorry, I'm just looking. Fabricated urgency is a great phrase. Thank you. But yeah, if it's about your family, if it's about your partner, if it's about specifics of your relationship, I've even said things like, have people asked you that kind of question? And you do have to be careful depending on who's asking, right? How that's going to be perceived. Sometimes it will be received as aggressive, even though it's clearly not. I'm one of the least sort of loud people in a workspace, but I've been called aggressive more times than I can count, right? But people will ask, for example, well, how do you, isn't it important in your religion to have kids? And what are you going to do about that? How wildly inappropriate is that, right? Even in queer spaces. And I said, well, if the, at times I've said, well, that is really important to me. And it's something that, and I get into all this stuff and it's now we're talking about my medical intentions. Absolutely not. It's perfectly okay to say, I'm not comfortable talking about this at work. And as much as I like and respect you, you and I don't have that relationship where I'm comfortable talking about that with you. And that doesn't mean I don't like you. It's just that we're not there at this point. And it feels awkward during my workday to talk about that. Anything that, sorry, I just want to make sure I'm reading this. My realtor earlier this year made me uncomfortable with her rapid weekend responses. Listen, I very much wanted to give her permission to not respond to me until that Monday. It didn't feel like my place at all. As the partner of one, for the love of God, if you work with one, please tell them to hold off, that it's okay. We're told to set boundaries, then it's those who direct that who are the worst ones at forcing their way past them. Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to establish yourself as someone who doesn't engage with that. And the thing that's really tough about that is, you know, you can become assumed to be not friendly, quote, not a team player. It can be received as you not being very nice. And all of that's coded, and that's coded in bias, right? That there is an entitlement, a sense of entitlement. I'm just speaking from the I, that I would talk about my religion vis-a-vis my sexuality, that I would talk about my religion vis-a-vis my gender expression. Why do I wear a headscarf that covers my neck one day and that shows a bit of my neck the next? Are we having this conversation, right? That is what is absurd, not the fact that I shut it down. And so a lot of this is actually internal work. Because that's going to happen anyway. And the people who are inclined to think that way about your boundaries and your personal body and mental and otherwise autonomy, it's on them, you know? How do you respond to the comment that you are aggressive? We're going to get deeper into this. Thank you, Kelly, for the question. I can cite one example carefully, and that is that there was an instance in which there was a lack of diversity going to be present at a particular event. And a contact of mine was going to be asked to be present in a way that I found truly problematic. And I said, and I quote, "Please do not ask my friends to be at this event just so that you can have 2 Black queer people walk across the stage." And I remember in that moment bringing my voice and my body so much down to be so much softer than it even is right now. And I remember feeling like I got cold, right? Because I was nervous to say that. And the call got silent. Like it was a video chat like this one, and it got really silent. And my boss called me after and he said, "That was just so aggressive." And I remember saying something like, "Was it aggressive? Or did it hit on something because you know in your gut that that's what was actually happening, right? Am I being aggressive, or is it something that no one's ever said to you, right? Or is it just true and it's uncomfortable? And it's okay that it's uncomfortable." And the other thing that we will get into more is that sometimes you just need to document things that people don't always love when you do that. But if there is a conversation like that, you'll have to weigh when this makes sense, but you might send an email that says something like, "Thank you so much for the opportunity to further discuss the issue of diversity and the importance of diversity at this event. I just wanted to reiterate that I'm perfectly happy to support having greater diversity at this event. I would be pleased to name some potential nominees for this award. I would be pleased to nominate some potential speakers for this event. I just wanted to make sure that I'm providing you with the resources that I can. I'm happy to be in consultation. I realize that it may have been difficult to hear my perspective, but I'm grateful for the reception that you gave it. Sincerely, your name." You know, and that's not, I'm just flying off the cuff, right? But sometimes we really do need to write these things down because in the span of memory, they might go away. You know, people may remember it differently depending on how they feel about you in 6 months. Sorry. All right, give yourself permission. I want to make sure I'm not eating up our time here. So one of the important things I think about is that other people, often people who don't have, perhaps it's cis straight folks, perhaps if you're a person of color, it's a white person, if you're a woman, perhaps it's a man. Other people have boundaries that they don't think twice about, right? If somebody needs 10 minutes to answer your email, they're just gonna not answer your email for 10 minutes, right? And think about, in the spaces that you occupy, who are those people, right? What does that look like? You know, you might have a coworker who's notorious for not getting back to people for hours. Maybe you don't want to go that extreme, but who is that? You know, what does that look like? Why doesn't that person think about it? If you need to move, you can take a break to do that. What isms that perhaps aren't even actually in your showing up in your workplace? What are the things that are controlling your movement that aren't even necessarily apparent in your workplace? So for example, a lot of people are socialized to not eat in front of other people, right? But if you're on Zoom calls for 10 hours a day, one thing that Trystan has always been great about that I am not great about is saying, I need to eat. I need to go to the bathroom, right? He's laughing. But trigger warning discussion of weight and things like that. I'm an anorexia survivor. I'm very self-conscious about talking about food and weight and eating at work. It's really difficult. I don't want to hear your diet talk. I don't want to eat with you necessarily, depending on what it is. But, we're in this format. I might need to shut off my camera and eat something so that I don't feel unwell. And other people do that without thinking. And so what are the ways in which you can look at what other people do and kind of model some of that behavior if it's a healthy behavior? If you don't want to shake hands, people don't have a right over your body, right? So you don't have to shake hands. You're allowed to be sick, right? You're allowed to be sick, take a sick day. You're allowed to be unwell. You're not being dramatic. You're allowed to be upset. You're allowed to be offended by something. IBM has a set of principles, and one of them is to be ready for camera off time. That's great. If it's what I understand, then it's great. So feel free to put in the chat, anything that you might think of as a boundary that other people set for themselves that might be appealing to you. Melissa, thank you. That's really kind. I tell my staff that I will never apologize or ask for permission for a normal human physiological need, nor should they. That's awesome. If you are a manager, and the best thing to do is to normalize it. And if you're in a position where you feel like, hey, look, I want to start modeling this healthy behavior, even if you're not a manager, go ahead and do that. If you're at a mid-level, there's always somebody who's, I don't want to say beneath you, but in a position where it would mean something to them to see you do it. So I remember just seeing people like go to the bathroom when they needed to go to the bathroom and being like, that's pretty cool. Or going to go get a sweater when they were cold or whatever it was, and just do that, And there were times where my behaviors in that way were not received well, but I know that someone else did it, right? And so I'm going to do it as well.
I'm doing some executive coaching right now, and I have this Post-it note that I share that I just have to remind me what to say to my clients, and it says, you have nothing to apologize for. And it's what I say to them when they're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I'm frazzled, it was a really hard day. And I'm just like, you have nothing to apologize for. They're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I'm gonna eat. You have nothing to apologize for. Right. And so that's my little reminder for them. It's my language, not to like, oh no, it's fine, but like, it is not appropriate for you to apologize about this because it is a perfectly normal human need. Okay. So to keep going, on this sort of this myth of the tyranny of urgency is just thinking like when something comes up, I'm a pleaser. I don't like knowing that a single human being is out there in the world having like an inkling of a negative thought about me. And I'm like, oh my God, I have to fix this right away or I'm done. And this happens at work all the time. If I think, oh my God, this person's upset with me, I have to call them. I have to write the perfect email. I have to fix it. And just like, dude, chill. And I'm saying to myself, dude, not duding all of you, but to myself, chill. And asking, do I have to respond? Do I have to respond now? What will happen if I do not respond? Can someone else handle this for me? And that's something that if something happens in a public sphere on Slack or in an all staff meeting, I mean, this is a big thing that Raquel and I would do for each other when we've worked together. It's just like a little Slack message. Hey, can you say something about that? Sure, no problem. We're going to talk about allyship in a minute. And then like, what is the best way to respond? Like, what is the most effective way? And not trying to like tone police myself here, but like, I'm a trans person. I want transphobia to end. And I know if I respond when I'm at a 10 instead of a 2, oh, that's not going to go well. They're not going to listen to me. And then maybe it makes me feel good because I made them feel bad, but like, is that actually changing the system so other trans people have a better time behind me? And then it's like, why was this upsetting to me if it is something like a microaggression or something that I perceive as bias? Sometimes it's not, and it's just my trauma talking. And so taking the chill, calling someone that you know to be like, this thing happened, that's messed up, right? And having someone do a reality check with you, because sometimes it's helpful to have someone be like, oh, I don't think that new staff member knows that you use non-binary pronouns or gender neutral pronouns, and I can talk to them about that. Like I've been able to help coach non-binary people around things like that, or whatever it is. So just like doing a little bit of self-work, figuring out the goal, and then I have a tool for you if you do decide to weigh in. But we wanted to really let you know, like, you do not have to respond now. And you have a whole cute slide about this right now.
Oh, sorry. Oh, goodness.
Okay.
All right. So who's this cat? Because this cat has been me. I have been this cat. So, you know, Trystan was talking about the idea of responding when you're 10 versus the 2 and vice versa. That's really real. And it's been really real for me. And it's something that I've had to really, really practice. And I've seen people in the chat say, you know, I feel like I can't leave an email unread. You know, my manager might tell me all the time to stop saying I'm sorry, but they don't understand that this is a trauma response. Absolutely, it's a trauma response. It's a societal conditioning response. It's making ourselves small sometimes. It's, if I say I'm sorry, maybe I won't get in trouble even for this thing that I shouldn't get in trouble for, because my body, my looks, my identity has been treated as a problem from however long, maybe just a year, maybe for my entire life, right? So that's real, and people, you know, I believe strongly in trauma-informed management, but that's not the world that all of us live in. It's in fact not the world that most of us live in. You know, I've said that to some managers, you know, by the way, there are people who are just conditioned to speak in that way, just like you were conditioned not to. I'm not always every manager's favorite person, but, when I am a manager, I exercise, I try to get the people who do report to me to practice, like, just being aware when they're saying they're sorry. And I also say things like, hey, unless there's a real emergency that's going on and we're all hands on deck, or we've already talked about the fact that, you know, for you, maybe a sort of alternative working schedule is better for you. Like, you do better maybe when you're working on something that doesn't require collaboration and it's 8 o'clock at night. I don't care, right? As long as, not just as long as the work's getting done, but as long as that doesn't mean you're then putting in a 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. day, that's fine, right? But otherwise, I don't want to hear from you, right? Not because I don't want to hear from you and I don't like you, but because that's not good for you. That's not good for our relationship. I don't want that kind of pressure between us. I don't want that expectation between us. And it's not actually good for the work. I don't think it makes us better at the work. So I encourage you, I've set some rules for myself, that I don't have to respond immediately, period. And by immediately, I mean, you're working on something, an email comes through, you don't have to stop what you're doing to immediately respond to that email, kind of regardless of what it is. And I would encourage you to think about, you can put it in the chat or not, an example of that. Like, what are the things that make you stop and just start responding to an email in the middle of something else? Maybe it's just something you do by conditioning. I know that for me, it's something that I've done in the past. And in fact, it makes me way scattered. It makes me less efficient. I forget what I'm doing. It screws me up. But in particular, you don't have to respond immediately to criticism. And I would encourage you not to respond immediately to criticism. In fact, if they were asking for an urgent response, it is perfectly okay to say, if they're saying, I need to hear from you immediately, it is perfectly okay to say, I am confirming receipt of this email. I'm going to take some time to reflect on the points and provide you with the full response. And you can send that the next morning, or you can send it at the end of the day. That needs to be something that we normalize, right? How often have we gotten a piece of really difficult feedback and we respond immediately? And then 30 minutes later, we remember something that we could have added. The next day, we remember something we could have added. And then maybe you're sending too many emails, or maybe the email gets too long. I have decided, and I started some time ago when I've gotten an email like that, I literally force myself to sleep on it. And maybe I'll start the email, I'll close out for the day. The next morning, I am backspacing and getting rid of at least 500 words in that email. Just want to check the chat really quickly. When I may not have done something right and I need to fix it. Trystan needs to leave in 10 minutes. I should talk faster. I'm the type of person, if you do not immediately answer, proceeds to call you. Oh, wait, you do this? Or other people do this to you, Alice? If the person does not immediately answer, proceeds to call your cell and office phone. I hate that. Okay. No, just okay. So, oh, my apologies. Okay. So if the person then calls your cell phone, don't answer. Send the email. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. That is inappropriate. Request for feedback. Think about it. If you're a manager, do you want the feedback that comes when someone's feeling anxious and feels like they're responding immediately because they have to, because of the dynamic of your relationship? Or do you want the thoughtful feedback? Again, I'm confirming receipt of this email is the most important thing to say. I'm confirming receipt of this email. I got your text. I got your message. I will get back to you by X. Request to complete an assignment. You're working. Someone says, hey, Raquel, hey, Trystan, I'm going to need a draft of a proposal, a fundraising proposal by Friday. All right, it's now Tuesday. It's Tuesday at, let's say 2 p.m. Send the email by 4 o'clock. I got your email. That will be done by Friday. Things that are harmful or offensive, those absolutely do not respond immediately. If you can pull away from that situation as quickly as possible, and until you can actually get some counsel, and I don't even mean just legal, but pull yourself out of the situation, step away from the situation, sit with it, evaluate it. You don't need to answer that immediately. Please don't. Again, when you're frustrated, hurt, or angered by a message or conversation, same thing that we do in our personal relationships, right? We shouldn't always respond immediately. So again, I'm encouraging you to just take some time. All right, Trystan, sorry.
No, would it be okay to pop over to some of my next sections? And then you can come back to yours when I'm gone. I'm so sorry.
Oh, here we go. We're going, here's a little preview. Oh, there's more.
More preview.
There you go.
Okay, I'm next. Yay. So I have a lot of folks asking about how do we ask for what we need without apologizing for it? And so I want to talk about myself having ADHD, which is undiagnosed for my entire life. I have literally decades of shame associated with the things that I need to make me be successful. And it wasn't until literally 2 or 3 years ago that I trained myself, okay, what if I pretend like having ADHD is a blessing and not a curse? And what if I approach asking for accommodations in that way? And really hearing Lena Waithe's speech and hearing the things that make us different, those are our superpowers. It's been okay, what if I treated this like my superpower? And that's the energy I brought in. And some, folks in the chat were talking about what does it mean? If, for example, you're a Black man in the workplace, and if you do try to assert yourself, it's going to be perceived as aggressive. And I can't speak to that specifically, but I can speak to the way that I try to approach everything, which is trying to make it feel like it's not a big deal what I'm asking for. I'm bringing it with love, just because that's my sort of approach to everything. So I'll show you how that looks in real time. You could click the thing.
Sorry.
So I just tell people I do my best work when I doodle or take notes during the meetings. So I'll say, I have ADHD. What that means for me is I make connections faster than probably anyone else on this team. My brain works very quickly. I'm able to multitask very well. And so when I'm presenting, I'm able to monitor the chat. I'm able to look ahead. I'm able to see what's happening. I can track energy in the space and in a room. I'm extremely creative. I bring a lot of out-of-the-box thinking. And just having a meeting where I'm sitting still looking at the screen is not something that I can do. So to do my best work, I'm going to need to doodle or color while I'm engaging. And just letting them know, here are my strengths that come with this thing that's different about me. And then here's what I'm gonna need in order to mitigate some of the harder things. Same thing with people, especially with the Zoom, but when working with people who are deaf or people who have other hearing challenges or people who are English as a second language, it can be very useful to just be able to see someone's mouth. And you can't have multiple people talking at the same time for some kinds of hearing challenges that people have. That is a perfectly reasonable accommodation that I have had to literally beg people to ask for. You know, so when I'm a manager, I always ask people, what do you need to do your best work? And I give them examples. So like, do you struggle with attention and focus? Do you want us to make sure that we're always facing the screen and people don't overtalk? Do you need a standing desk? Do you need to lie down? Right? I give people lots of options so they know they can ask for it. And then for myself, I just bring it as, hey, here's a strength. Same as being trans. I treated being transgender as a liability for most of my professional career until I was like, what if I was like, oh, bonus, I'm also trans, which means you're going to be able to build projects that address gender in really unique and different ways. I'm going to be able to reach this new community, blah, 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 etc. And so that's my piece there. Okay. And then I have to go. I'm so sad. All right. This is a little allyship tool that I'm going to give you because I think we are in a really strong position. Often we think, like, oh, if I am trans, I can't possibly show up for other staff of color, right? That's for like other people with more privileged identities. I disagree. I think that we have much more empathy and much more understanding of what dope allyship feels like. So here's a tool that I use when I am stepping up for somebody else, especially if they've asked me to do it. I will say, like, is it okay if I weigh in here and take this? I'm happy to hear no. If Raquel is like, no, I got it, I'll handle this, dude. Great. Other times, most of the times, Raquel is like, oh my God, please deal with this racism. I can't. No problem. So I start either publicly or one-on-one. I start by asking them a question. And it's because I'm trying to understand, as someone said, like, is this my trauma talking? Am I misunderstanding the situation? It also is how I hack my own limbic system's response to conflict. Like, I don't want to be in a fight with someone. I don't. And so part of how I hack feeling scared and nervous and how I get them out of a defensive place is I just ask a question. You know, I don't think I understand what you said there. Can you just say a little bit more? If they chose the white applicant instead of the applicant of color, can you help me understand the thought behind it, right? I don't want to make an assumption. I want to assume best intention, and I'm hacking their own fragility by doing that. And then whatever it is that they say, the next step is I find points of commonality. I'm a nerd, so I think about the Venn diagram. So even if I'm super angry at them, I think, no, this is a human being. We have to have overlap. I want to do this allyship effectively. How do I do it? So then I find points of commonality. And then I can say, oh, I can totally understand why you might feel that way, right? You're finding that overlap. You're calling them in. You're creating a safe space to have an intervention conversation with them. I used to believe that too, but then, whatever. Yes, I love Raquel's headscarf too, and I would love to know more about it. But what is the impact that asking her to tell us all about it in front of everyone could have? Share the impact. This is gonna feel so stupid for you because as a person with marginalization, of course you already know how's that gonna impact someone. Most people have never thought about that. So you can just say, you know, I know this wasn't your intention, but can you imagine how it might feel to be the only whatever on staff and to have someone ask you such a personal question? You're just inviting them to have empathy. And then step 4 is where we usually start with step 1. Step 4 is a better way to be in alignment with your values is to ask her privately or not ask her at all. Someone's describing this as a compassionate response. To be honest, I don't think about this as compassion. I think about it as effective. This is rooted in this neuroscience of behavior change. And it is so stupid that we have to twist ourselves into pretzels to like actually make things be better. But like, I also want things to be better. So I just want to know about like, how do we actually do that is the 5 steps. When it's helpful for me, I print them out. As someone said, like having it written out in advance. I do that because I start to get into place with my hot face. And so it's really helpful for me to be like, no, I'm going to ask a question to get more information. I'm going to find points of commonality. I'm going to build their empathy. Then I'm going to say, this is why that was fucked up. And then I'm going to try and keep the door open for more conversation. I'm so sorry, I have to go now and talk about being a pregnant man. This is my Ally of the Year award. It goes to Don Wooten, who was amazing whistleblower. As an example of how no matter where you are, no matter what your identities are, you can be in dope allyship with other people in solidarity. Okay, I love you, goodbye.
Bye. Love you. All right, everyone. I'm so sorry. We did, we had more time. We needed more time than we thought. But thank you so much for sticking with it. So I'll just try to go through things as quickly as possible. We will look into whether or not the slides can be shared afterward. But there are a couple of things that we wanted to touch on. So one of them is navigating disclosure. And this is connected to some of the questions, but it's sort of what's sourced within you. And one of the things that can come up that's really tough is, this idea, and it's, out and equal is in essence about bringing more of our full selves to work, right? What does that mean though when you're bringing multiple marginalizations into a space? In my experience, sometimes a person can have a tragedy in their personal life, plus also something else happen that's maybe not so easy. And it's something that will gain them some sympathy. Maybe they'll get a little slack. Maybe they're going through divorce, right? And so people might say, oh, she's going through divorce. Take it easy on her. The person who has some kind of marginalization with their identity, they might be assigned as having drama, right? And I've heard that word used in relation to someone who's had a home invasion, a parent pass away. And that's so cruel and and but it is common. And so I ask people to sort of think about what feels safe to share about your life. And as unnatural as it might feel, sometimes, the reminder that these folks are not, you might be friendly with them and you might establish relationships with some of them, but sometimes they'll hold a little bit closer to the chest. And we provided the Toni Morrison piece here, that you're doing the work for yourself, that you make the job, it doesn't make you, and that you're the person you are, not just your performance. Another thing that is really important for a lot of us is to understand that we are operating in this space of invisibility and hypervisibility. So for a lot of us, who we are is commodified. Why is it that you are the person charged with or most likely to be asked to do the DEI work? Maybe you're celebrated as a diverse member of the team. Maybe they want to put you on the poster, right? But at the same time, the things that you're experiencing, the things that you're achieving are less visible. Another thing is that you might experience more scrutiny because of that visibility. So it's really a double-edged sword. So something that, for example, I've experienced is being at an event and, I'm literally 2 minutes behind because I've never been to the town or the space before. That gets noticed and called out, regardless of how much money I've raised that week. I've done development work. Meanwhile, somebody else can duck out 20 minutes early and nobody notices, right? It's a really intense thing to deal with. Thank you, Katie, for saying we have nothing to apologize for. I feel like I was stumbling throughout the platform for a bit. Tracy says, a friend of mine says you don't have to bring your whole self to work all the time. I have mixed feelings about that because I feel like that is exactly why I work with our ERG. I think our ERGs and our DEI committees, they're aspirational, right? They work to make our spaces better and safer so that people can gradually bring more and more and more of ourselves to work. It doesn't mean that we can now, exactly what Eric said. The work that we're doing is to make it so that it feels like everybody else gets to feel, right? And so I provided this example here. I've been working at sort of regular day jobs, right? And then being on Al Jazeera at night because my identity is a headline, right? And so it's difficult, to navigate that. It's difficult. And I wanted to just step back to the question, that Trystan was talking about in terms of when people ask you about yourself. One thing that people do need to kind of sometimes learn is they don't actually need to know things, right? They need to know the things that are relevant to do their job. They don't need to know things about you. It may be nice, but everything that you give of yourself is a gift. Everything you give of yourself is of your energy. They don't need to know why you wear a headscarf or not, or why you don't work on Saturdays or whatever it is, right? I did want to share this with you all as well. So this graphic comes from an organization in the UK, and it illustrates the quote problem woman of color in the workplace. And this can be modified to apply to other identities as well. So a diverse person entering the workplace, you join the organization, there's a honeymoon, everyone's really excited to have you there. Maybe they've never met anyone like you before. They want you to go to all the fundraisers, all the events, all the summits, everything. You're fantastic, right? They invite you and encourage you to share what the things are that need to change in the organization. Maybe you've even been specifically tasked with or hired to bring those issues to light. Unfortunately, the fact is that the things that we're bringing to light, they sort of begin and end with the people in power. So the very people who you need to change and you need to challenge are the same people who are going to be hearing that difficult feedback, right? And so what happens often there is a switch wherein you become the problem, right? So you go from being this like wonder to them to a problem. They can organize, they can ignore what you're saying, deny it, shift blame. The responsibility becomes yours, or it becomes perceived as a personal problem that you have. And this is sort of in the worst scenario, right? And then the individual or the individuals might end up being retaliated against, right? And so again, that's a worst case scenario. And this is sort of what is responsible for the extraordinary levels of turnover that we see in a lot of workplaces, especially with diverse members of staff. And we don't have a lot of time left, but I said, you know, they didn't like that. So you brought your concerns forward. What do you do if it doesn't go that well? One of the things is to know what exactly are their stated procedures for handling it, right? Having your employee handbook on hand, all of the versions that you've ever signed ever before, everything that they've ever said online, internally about what the procedures are. Where does the accountability really lie? So not too long ago, a few years ago, I had an instance where a particular individual had done something really problematic to another individual. The focus really remained on that person rather than on the entire system that was allowing that to happen, right? Just so for an internal check, we can be angry at individuals, but to remember to look at the entire system as well. One thing that I've had to start really practicing is documentation as a deterrent. So another thing that you can do to sort of start establishing yourself as a person who has boundaries and a person who refuses to tolerate sort of offensive and problematic things. And as a professional, really, this is not just about when you're offended. When you've had a conversation wherein you've expressed a concern or you've asked for a deadline extension or, you know, anything that might be a little sensitive, send an email, right? Just to have that be normal. People might act like you're being litigious, but at the end of the day, it is perfectly fine. It is very professional, in fact, to say, thank you for having that conversation with me. I just wanted to reiterate, you know, so that we both are on the same page that this is what we talked about. Thank you for taking my phone call about my interaction with Bob. As I detailed in our conversation, this is what happened. Understand that Bob might see that email depending on the dynamics of the relationship, but just document that, it will help you. I'm sorry, I'm speeding through things. The other thing is that a lot of us work for entities that have boards of directors, they have trustees, they have law firms, they have endowments, right? You need that as well in your own form, right? So you may not have a multi-billion-dollar international law firm, but you have friends who are experts in their own way. You know people who know people. You have your own counsel. In a situation that I dealt with, I ended up gathering a bunch of people in my home who I know are brilliant, who are professional, and who have different levels of experience. The problem is I did that too late, right? I did that about a week before I lost my job. But gathering people around to get advice and to get counsel is really important. And to identify your supporters before it's too late. I had a coworker once write a letter of support about things. I didn't ask her for it. I didn't know that she knew everything that was in the email. It was one of the most powerful examples of allyship I have ever seen. Unfortunately, I didn't really share all that was going on in the situation kind of until it was too late. And so I would say to intervene for yourself sooner rather than later. Sometimes we sort of are inclined to try and fix it all ourselves or fix as much of it as we can before seeking any help. but it's better to sort of seek help earlier on. I just wanted to share this quote with you as well, that the visibility which makes us the most vulnerable is that which is also the source of our greatest strength. And in these conversations, it's so easy to feel like what we're bringing to the table is a challenge. But at the end of the day, for example, I would not change who I am, right? What I am and what I bring to the table has not only done great things for the places I've worked for, but is something that I'm really proud of, right? And so to think of yourself as a fantastic addition to wherever you are. Just gonna zoom right through Trystan's slides, my apologies. See, I'm apologizing. Someone asked in the chat, why do people get upset with apologies? And my answer to that is femphobia, that it is seen as a feminine thing to do, regardless of your gender identity, or expression, and that is perceived as a weak thing to do. Another thing that we wanted to talk about is, how do you decide when to stay or go? And ultimately, that is, a thing that is deeply personal. But one of the things that Trystan is brilliant at is always making sure that he has opportunities in his line of sight. And it is something that I'm less good at, right? But every job is your dream job until it's not, right? And it never means to stop performing at your very best, because you want to make sure that you always have that reference and leave behind plenty of people who remember you as a fantastic employee, right? But there is nothing wrong. In fact, it's a good idea to keep your cover letter up to date, to make sure you're engaging on LinkedIn, which is something that I haven't done that much of in the past. One thing that Trystan does that he shared with me is every time he does an event like this, he'll follow up with the people who were participants in this space. Just always making sure that you're keeping your name in rooms that you're not in is a fantastic thing, because a lot of us have less access to those sort of spaces anyway. So we have, I think, about 3 minutes. Again, I'm very sorry for needing to speed up there at the end, but we have about 3 minutes. Does anybody have any last sort of comments or questions that they would like to share, to ask? Slide on self-advocacy. Sure, there wasn't, this is like a test for me here. Self-advocacy. Okay, so this was Trystan's, yeah, he's awesome at this. Just reminders, you're not your job, your boss is not your friend. So a lot of, there's a tweet that somebody shared a long time ago that said, if your job starts calling itself your family, you know that they're going to mess you up emotionally in a deeper way than you ever imagined. And that sounds profoundly cynical, but I also understand it at a really deep level. So I would just keep that in mind. It's okay to care for and love, and it's good to have human connection and be the loving, brilliant person that you are, but also to protect yourself. Your job is using you. They're getting a session, they're getting labor from you, they're getting physical space from you, they're getting your time, they're getting time away from your family, they're getting your energy, they're getting access to the things that your body and mind produces. Make sure you're using it as well. Very often we're like, all we need to do is get money from this job, but no, you can get connections. There's nothing wrong with reaching out to people. There's nothing wrong with using those connections as well. Obviously, we all need to follow the various confidentiality agreements and so forth that are in place, but please reach out to the people just like other people would. If other people go to an event or party or whatever for their job, they're doing networking, they're sliding their name, they're reaching out to them on LinkedIn. We need to train ourselves to do that as well. Trystan is a genius at this, to hustle, to track your successes, to always have documents that say, that you can pull up at a moment's notice. This is how much I raised. This is a success that I had. A lot of people don't have that. Bring those things to your annual review when you ask for a raise. Thank you all for a great session. I think we're going to get cut off in just a minute. Best session so far. You're awesome. Thank you all so much. Sorry, I spoke at mock speed there at the end. We appreciate you. We're going to try to share the deck if we can. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you everyone for being so open, vulnerable, transparent, open-minded, caring, and for loving yourself